Good morning, everybody. Today is Sunday, November the 4th, 2001. We're here at Temple Beth Israel in Waltham with Mr. Morris Hollender, distinguished member of the Temple, cantor, husband, friend to all, and Holocaust survivor. And we're talking with him about his adventures, about his growing up in Czechoslovakia, and all the other stories about his life. Mr. Hollender, let's start out with your childhood. Tell us a little bit about your childhood, growing up in Czechoslovakia and with your family and friends.
I was born the 11th of February 1926 in Czechoslovakia, which was really a democracy in the middle of Europe, very similar to the American democracy. I was very lucky that I was born in a free country, which gave so much freedom to all the minorities. And I grew up, I was born in a little village, close to the big city, that had a population of 25,000. But at that time, at that part of the Czechoslovakia, which was the eastern part, so-called Carpathia-Ruthénia, it was considered at that time 25,000 population, a very big city. The name was Berehovo. In Hungarian they call it Beregszász, and the population was more than half of the population was Jewish. So in a little village about 12 miles from the big city, there were little villages with Jewish people who were farmers. My father and 5 generations before him were farmers, which is unusual if somebody says the Jews were farmers. But this was the area where Jews were farming. They have little businesses, and usually we didn't have a chance to go to school just a few years in the little village. It wasn't even economically to hire a teacher, a Hebrew teacher, because there were not too many Jewish children. So when we grew up, when we were already 7, 8, or 9 years old, we went to the city, where we went to schools, public schools, gymnasium, yeshiva, and there were my grandmother and some relatives. So my childhood in the little village was in many ways very interesting, that most of the people were related to each other. There were uncles and aunts and children, 6 children in every family. And my father had a little family farm, which was really just for our own enough, to survive. But he had also a little variety shop. So my childhood started very early with many responsibilities. Once I started to go to Cheder in the morning, I had to get up at 6 o'clock, and half a day in the Hebrew school, half a day in public school. And so there was not too much time for playing, because we had to help at home also with the chores. My father and mother, whenever we were 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. I was the 5th child. I had a younger sister who was about 2.5 years younger than me. The oldest one, my sister, Matilda, then was Ludwig, Wolfleib, then came Shulem, Samuel. Yeah, that was after my first sister was Serena, who was still alive, thank God, in Florida. And then after Shulem, I came, Moshe, Morris, and Hermine was my younger sister. So when I was already 8 years old, they sent me to the city. I was living with my grandmother, and I went to schools, as I say. I was occupied from 6 o'clock in the morning until 11. Sometimes I went to bed midnight. But my memories are very nice for that area before Hitler came. Until 38, my childhood was a perfect childhood, not worrying about anything, Of course, my parents already worried because in 1933 Hitler came to Germany, so they started to worry much about what's happening. But the government was very friendly to the Jews. President Masaryk, he was Ohev Yisrael. The Jewish people loved him as father, like we love here George Washington, the father of the country. He protected us in many ways. We had our high schools. There was even higher institutions of learning already, Hebrew, the gymnasiums. And as I say, we as children were not involved in the situation in Europe. My father was already very much concerned about, and he became very much, not depressed, but very serious. There were situations when even I picked up the violin and started to play the way how I could by myself. Nobody was teaching me. And he used to say, you shouldn't really play the violin when so many people are suffering in the world. He already knew what's going on. He didn't want, so we were very serious. There was not too much joy when it came already close to 1938. In 1938, Czechoslovakia was falling apart. I was then 12 years old. So my really boyhood until age of 12 was a perfect one. The family was together and everything was just worked fine. And we were very hopeful that nothing will happen to us. But it happened that in 1937, President Masaryk passed away. And we were listening to the radio, his funeral, and my grandmother, who wasn't really much educated, you know, so she was listening and she says to me, who knows what's going to happen to us Jews? I said, Grandmother, why are you worrying about it? She said, now that our beloved president has gone, I'm afraid that our situation is going to get worse. Why? He said, because up to now, she said that the world respected, even Hitler respected Masaryk, that he was such a known personality. And by the way, now a monument will be erected in his memory in Washington, D.C., close to the White House. I'm just jumping. So at that time, already, Chamberlain, Munich, and everything, Hitler expected that Czechoslovakia should give up the part of so-called Sudetenland, which had a population about of 3 million Germans. And he said that should be incorporated in Germany. So he succeeded with Chamberlain, and France and England didn't keep their agreement that they will come to help Czechoslovakia in case of need. So they just pressured Czechoslovakia to give up that part of their country. So they gave to Hitler the Sudetenland. Let me just describe the life of a young boy at my age, the time before the war break out. At age 13, I had my bar mitzvah. The bar mitzvahs at that time were very modest, very simply comparing with the mitzvahs today. My mother baked some eierkichel and some pastry, and we had some shops, some wine. And I have learned the Haftorah and reading the part of the Mafter, and everything was just, everybody wishes you the best, and there was no kind of partying. But it doesn't mean that we didn't have any fun. Especially the holidays were very expected. The whole week we were working hard to prepare everything, to have what was necessary. There were many in our area poor people who during the whole week didn't have much to eat, but on Sabbath they had plenty. So the Sabbath, of course, was the most important. My mother, she was preparing a lot of goodies simple food, but very delicious, and I could say very nutritious also. There were many people who were coming to our house. They needed help. Money was very scarce at that time. You know, people who lived in the countryside. But my mother was always ready to give everybody who came a little flour, eggs, cheese, even candles for the Shabbos light, you know. So there was always people are coming and going. There were people who came in early in the morning for an aduva to ask for some help. So my mother, the first thing was, she asked, Reb Yid, Mr. Yid, have you davened this morning? He said, no. She said, here is a Taliesin film. First you have to daven, and then I make you a nice breakfast. We had eggs enough and good fresh bread baked by my mother every week. So there was always fun. I remember a funny story about an old Jewish guy with a big beard. He came early in the afternoon and he was very hungry. It was in the summer. My mother said, I don't have much to give you. Can give you a piece of bread, and I have a squash soup. Squash soup? What kind of a soup is that? Of course, that squash soup was very delicious. It was first milk, sour cream, and dill, and everything. And it was a nice summer soup. She said, well, what? This squash? This is just for the animals. Why are you making squash soup? So my mother said, I can give you. If you like it, fine. If not, you don't have to eat it. So he got a plate with a squash soup, a nice piece of bread. And the squash, of course, had those noodles, you know. So it was delicious, so good. He had full of noodles on his beard, you know. And we were laughing like children, looking at him. And when he finished it, he said, lady, do we have some more of that soup? I would like to have. No. There was many little stories about people coming and going, who came very late. We had a portable bed. We could open it. Anybody could sleep at our place. Had shelter and food. If there was somebody who was going from town to town, he couldn't afford to pay tickets on the train. So they went just from little village to village, town to town. And he slept here, he ate there. So, but the Sabbath, Friday evening, we were all together. We were singing Zemiros, girls as boys. We were all equal, you know. And in fact, my wife, she wasn't my wife yet, but she tells me the similar stories as it was so similar at their home where she was born. And so the Friday evening was a very pleasant one. The family together. Everybody tells little stories what happened during the week in school and funny things. And if I complained, my mother or father, the school teacher punished me. You know, usually they hit you with on your hand or your behind, you know. And so I felt sometimes it was not justified because I didn't do anything wrong. So my parents said, but you probably were close to those who did those things, you know, so you just, but they never went to school to complain, to say, how come you beat up my child, you know, that wasn't happening. School, that was mixed boys and girls, you know, the area where I lived, there were many languages, many nationalities spoken, Russian, Ukrainian, Hungarian, Romanian, Polish, Slovakian, Yiddish. So it was like a mixed bag of everything. We learned many of those languages, but not really perfectly well. The closest language, we spoke at home Yiddish.